Namaskar. At the outset, I thank all the authorities of the Kantalur Shala who have arranged this conclave on technical themes in Veda, Vedanta and Yajur TRISANDHA and have given me this opportunity to share my thoughts. The topic I wish to speak is on recent researches in Vedic studies. I would like to thank K. Narayanan Potti, the president of Kantalur Shala, and the director-in-chief, Professor P.C. Murli Madhavan sir, who gave me this opportunity to present my thoughts before this August gathering. Whilst thinking about the recent advances or recent researches in the field of Vedic studies, I have considered the time span of last about 10 years and have seen what are the major contributions that are going on at present in this particular field of study. There are different aspects in which the Vedas are being studied in India and abroad in the modern world. We have a number of editions or critical editions and also their translations available in printed form. The major translations are in English, but they are also present in other foreign languages such as Japanese, French, Italian, German, etc. Even the Indian languages such as Hindi, Marathi, Gujarati, Kannada, Malayalam, Tamil, we have a number of texts translated into these vernacular languages in India by different scholars of these regions. Other than bringing out the critical editions of whole text, some researchers focus their study on specific part of that particular text. They study some hymns or some verses from a particular hymn and try to understand or interpret their meaning and how these verses or hymns are employed in different rituals. What are the philosophical ideas therein, or what is the mythical idea or mythology that is being told from that particular part of the text. Some scholars aim to study the mythology and rituals as it is presented in these texts. Some scholars go on and do the comparative study, historical study, or cultural study. Those who are specialized in grammar and linguistics are focusing on a particular words and try to understand their meaning and thereby giving their contribution to the study of these Vedic texts. Some scholars who have the expertise in philosophy search for different philosophical ideas that are present. Here also in this conclave, we have this Veda and Vedanta. So Vedanta is mainly a philosophical part that is present in the Upanishads. But we should know that not only the Upanishads, but early Vedic text, right from the Rigveda Samhita, we have different ideas pertaining to philosophy that are present in these texts. Similarly, in the tradition of the Yajur Veda as well as in the Atharva Veda, we have a number of hymns that present a variety of philosophical ideas in front of us. Some scholars also study the ancillary literature or supplementary literature in this field. The Vedangas are there. The main Vedangas such as Vyakarana, Nirukta or Vedanga Jyotisha are very well known to us. But there are different commentaries and also the later texts, for example, Sarvanukramani, different Pratishakyas, or also the texts that present before us the employment of these Vedic hymns in the later times. For example, there is a text such as Rugvidhana, in which we come across the employment, rather secondary employment of the Vedic hymns from the Rigveda and how they are beneficial for different purposes. So there are a number of texts in later Vedic or post-Vedic period also, which help in understanding this Vedic tradition when we see from the modern perspective. So recently we have seen that edition of the Taittiriya Samhita was completed by Professor T.N. Dharmadhikari. Late Dr. Dharmadhikari was working on this particular edition for a few decades, and various parts were already published, but the last part was published a few years ago. And now we have a complete Taittiriya Samhita with both the commentaries, that is of the Bhattabhaskara and Sayana, in this critical edition, which has been published by T.N. Dharmadhikari from the Vedic Sanshothan Mandal located in Pune. Recently, a new translation of the Rigveda was published into English by Stephanie Jamieson and Joel Brereton. Here, they have completely translated the Rigveda, all the 10 mandalas or all the hymns that are therein. They have also published different notes on these hymns on the internet, and with that help we can have an updated version of the interpretation of the Rigveda. As we all know, there are different Indian and foreign translations already present in the Rigveda, and therefore one should see what exactly this Jamieson Brereton edition or translation gives us for study, because a number of things that are already been told in earlier translations might be the same. A few additions or different interpretations, however, are presented in this particular translation. And so nowadays, scholars tend to refer to this particular translation of Jamieson Brereton while quoting something from the Rigveda. Then, as we have seen earlier, there are studies of specific parts. Several hymns from the Rigveda and the Atharva Veda are being studied, and a number of different interpretations are being given. Some of them have also tried to study the geographical or historical idea that is presented in this particular hymn. Some new approach in interpretation or collecting the cultural elements from these compositions are being carried out while studying these hymns. Some scholars are concentrating on studies of particular words that are present in the Vedic Samhitas, how they appear at different places, and whether you should interpret the word in the similar manner or in a different manner. For example, the word Samudra appears in the Vedic text right from the Rigveda. Earlier, we were told that the Samudra means a water body, but not necessarily sea or ocean. And then, according to the hymn in which this particular word appears, the scholars were trying to interpret its meaning differently. Somewhere like river, somewhere as a pond, or maybe a stream. But then there are some scholars who say that if the word Samudra is being used at a number of places, then you should not interpret it differently at different places, and the proper meaning which is present now, that is ocean or sea, should be taken, and everywhere you should apply this particular meaning. And there are studies who show that after we apply this particular meaning in a uniform manner all over the text, then some new results about their geographical position or historical position come before us. So this is important to study the words that are present in the Vedas. Some also see the interpretation not only from the modern point of view, but from the viewpoint of different commentators, how they are looking at this particular hymn or that particular word, and how they have tried to understand the meaning of that particular word. Some study the employment of the hymns in the ritual, and while doing this, we can understand how that particular text or that particular myth or that particular ritual has developed in the course of time. There are different texts in the Vedic period that were composed at different time periods. There are different stratas that are present in these texts and composed over the period of time. And we have a text spread across different centuries or different decades and presented as a single text before us, but it is not like a monolithic appearance. It has a different parts, and to understand this, it is necessary to see how the text is developed, and that can be done when you study the specific parts of that text and try to locate those parts with historical context or seeing the historical context as well. Some studies are being focused on mythology and rituals, as I have already mentioned. Professor G.U. Thite from Pune has recently brought out a book called Vedic Mythology and another book called Agnishtoma. Actually, as from the title, you can understand the Vedic mythology is the book related to mythology, as well as the text called Agnishtoma is related to ritual. The thing is that the actual works are not freshly done by Professor Thite, but these are the translation of the works that were already presented before us by German and French scholars. In the modern times, many times it happens that we do not know the German and French languages, and therefore the works that were already carried out in these languages are not known to us. We cannot understand what these authors have already told us, and therefore the work of Professor Thite is focusing on this particular area, and he is trying to translate these texts that were already published in German and French. The Vedic mythology is earlier work by Hermann Guntert that has been published around 100 years ago, and now it is available into English. Similarly, L'Agnishtoma is work in the French, which has now been published into English. Recently, Professor Thite has also published a 3-volume work entitled Trilogy by H.H. Meyer, and therefore these works also have their own interest as well as their own importance. And while studying the Vedas, these works or this translation come in handy, and we can understand the meanings or we can understand the thoughts that were put forth by these German and French scholars in the last century. Professor Michael Witzel from Harvard University has been studying the different myths that were spread all over the world. And world mythology, I think the first volume is being published, and he is working ahead, and maybe different volumes will come into published form in near future. Professor Kyoko Amano from Japan has concentrated on the work of the Maitrayani Samhita, which is one of the important schools of the Krishna Yajurveda, as we all know. I have seen that this is the peculiar feature of the Japanese scholars, that they dedicate their whole life to particular text or particular school, and they thoroughly study all the aspects of that particular text throughout their life. They do not study different text at a single time, but they concentrate a single text and study it completely as long as possible. So she has published a number of papers like Ritual Context of the Satra Myths, Ritual Explanation, Concealing Its Name, or Non-Shrauta Ritual in the Maitrayani Samhita. And through these texts, she is trying to understand the ritual that is presented in the Maitrayani Samhita. The first part of the edition of the Maitrayani Samhita has also been published by Kyoko Amano, but it has been published before 2010, so I have not considered it here, but this was an important publication from this Japanese scholar. In the field of Atharva Veda, we all know that Professor S.S. Bahulkar is working for a long time, and along with myself, we have a number of scholars like Professor Arlo Griffiths, Professor Nirmala Kulkarni, Shilpa Sumanta, and Dr. Julieta Rotaru, who are working in the field of the Atharva Veda. Here, what we do is we try to understand the rituals and myths from the tradition of the Atharva Veda. We also try to study the tradition of the Atharva Veda itself, as it is presented through different texts in different regions. because we know that in the regions of Gujarat, Maharashtra and Karnataka, we have the tradition of the Shaunaka school of the Atharva Veda. However, in Kashmir or Odisha and West Bengal, we have the tradition of the Paipalada school of the Atharva Veda. And therefore, we try to study these different schools, their traditions, and various texts composed in ancient period like the Samhita, Upanishads, and ritual texts, as well as the modern prayogas that were composed in last 200 to 300 years. Regarding the Paipalada school, one important publication has been brought out by Professor Griffiths and Shilpa Sumanta, Domestic Rituals of the Atharva Veda in the Paipalada tradition of the Orissa. We have a text in Orissa called Vivahadi Karma Panjika. This is an important ritual manual which is used even in the modern days by the priests of Paipalada school present in that region. And this publication was brought out by French Institute of Pondicherry a few years ago. Then, as I have told earlier, we have the historical and cultural studies. And here we find the works that are related to the geography in the Vedic texts, historical information that is presented in these texts, and so on. In case of Indian scholars, right from the age of Lokmanya Tilak, who wrote the books like Arctic Home in the Vedas and Orion, we tried to fix the background of the Vedas, like when they were composed and where they were composed, and try to see the time frame and place of their composition. So right from that age of Lokmanya Tilak, these thoughts were ongoing, and different scholars have interpreted the Vedic text in different manner and have given their thoughts regarding this historical background of the Vedas. We also have interdisciplinary studies like archaeological, textual, and linguistic studies that are related to Aryan problem, because the Aryas are there present in the Vedic texts, but we do not find easily the archaeological data that can be related to the Aryans in specific manner. Earlier, there was a myth of Aryan invasion, then it changed to Aryan migration, and now the scholars are saying that Aryans are Indian. They were present in Punjab, Rajasthan, and other regions of India as well. So the thoughts or the ideas about Aryans are also changing for last 100 years, and every time some new evidence comes up, we change our mind, we change our idea, and we have some updated knowledge about who these Aryans were. Recently, I came across a book edited by Romila Thapad entitled Which of Us Are Aryans? Rethinking the Concept of Our Origins. And in this book, different scholars from the background of Vedic studies, archaeological, textual studies, and linguistics also have written a variety of articles. And this actually is a good addition to the Aryan problem, or this particular riddle that different scholars are trying to solve for a very long time. Then we can discuss a few things about linguistic studies. Here we have a different background, such as studies in Vedic language. Proper means what is the language, or how is the language of Rigveda, whether it changes in the Yajur Veda and Samaveda. If different words are being introduced, what is their meaning, or whether the meaning changes when the word comes from the Rigveda to the time of the Atharva Veda, or later in the Brahmanas or Upanishads. Some such studies are being carried out. Similarly, the studies of specific words or interpreting these words are ongoing. This is sometimes done with a single word, or sometimes also about the compounds, that whether that compound is to be understood in one way or the other. And if you understand it differently, then what can be the meaning of that particular word. So some such studies are being conducted. And those who are from the field of grammar, they also try to study the different texts on grammar and linguistics. As I have already mentioned, there are the texts like the tradition of Ashtadhyayi of Panini as well as Nirukta, and there are a variety of texts available under the name of Shiksha and Pratishakya. So all these studies are going on at present as well. And some of the names like Alexander Lubotsky, Georges Jean Pinot, Masato Fuji, and Elizabeth Tucker, every time they come up with different word studies and they present their thoughts in different conferences, and we get some new ideas and interpretations about the terms used in the Vedic literature. While I was going through all these works of different scholars during my studies in the field of Vedas for last decade, I have seen that a lot of work has already been done. But should we say that it means that this particular field, that is Vedic studies, is exhausted now and there is nothing to do in future? But I find that this is not true. Some of the scholars like Professor Thite sometimes opine that almost all the work is exhausted now and nothing is remaining to be done in the future time. But I find that still there is a scope to study further in the field of Vedas. I find that although the critical editions and translations have been done in the Vedic field, some texts are still there where we can bring out the new edition, as well as the translations are also to be done. For example, the case of Maitrayani Samhita, the Taitiriya Samhita, Taitiriya Brahmana, as well as different Shrauta Sutras and Gruhya Sutras, we find that a good translations are not being published till date. And if some scholar takes up this opportunity, he can select a text, work hard on that particular text, and bring out a good edition with English translation or even the regional translation, say it in Malayalam, Marathi, Tamil, Hindi, any language, but it should be a welcome contribution to the field of Vedic studies. We also have many ancillary texts, Vedangas, and also the texts of different commentators on the Vedic texts, which are not published, or they were published say 100 or 150 years ago. They are no more available. I had been in contact with Narayanan Potti sir, who is president of this Kantalur Shala, and we found a few texts a few years ago, and that was not easily available in Kerala itself when it was published from Kerala 100 years ago. So these commentaries are very important, and we should consider republishing or translating these commentaries and try to understand what these commentaries are telling us and what they bring out in front of us in modern times. Similarly, much work can be done in the field of historical and cultural studies. And as I have already shown, the grammatical and linguistic studies are also ongoing, and this approach can also be enhanced in the future time, and different studies can be carried out. I think that in case of mythology, much of the work has already been done, but still studying these ancient myths with a new approach, this is the area which is possible, and some new contribution may be done in this particular field, because earlier we have seen the mythological figures or the different myths as they are presented in this Vedic literature only with a viewpoint of myth. But we can see how these myths were used for the purpose of rituals. We can also try to understand or try to see whether there is any history actually present behind this myth, and then we can give new interpretation of that particular myth, because this is the nature of Indian people from ancient times, that we do not record history in the form of history. I mean, what we think about history in modern times or in modern sense, but they try to preserve the history in the form of a myth. And therefore, myths are not completely false, or mythological things that never happened on this earth, but they have some historical value, they have some historical figures mentioned therein, and they are waiting for us to find that history part from that study of myths. So with this new approach of bringing out the history from these myths, one can again study a few myths, if not all, from this new approach. So I think that with this description of future scope and the background of recent researches that have been carried out in the field of Vedic studies, one can go ahead in the coming time and contribute to the study of Vedic literature in future. Thank you. Thank you very much.